You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What separates anger that fuels us from anger that destroys everything we care about? Join me for an empowering exploration. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We may have been told our entire lives that anger is the emotion we need to eliminate, that feeling it at all means something is wrong with us, and that good people do not get angry. The shame we carry about this emotion is more profound than almost any other emotion, and that shame is exactly what keeps us trapped in cycles we cannot seem to break. Dr. Mitch Abrams has a private practice providing sport, clinical, and forensic psychology services, and is also an expert in the treatment of trauma. Since 2000, he has worked inside the prison system in New Jersey and now oversees psychological services for 7 of the state's prisons as chief psychologist for Rutgers University Correctional Healthcare. He is also a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Rutgers Health Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Dr. Abrams is the founder and CEO of Learned Excellence for Athletes, utilizing anger management training to assist athletes, coaches, and professionals reach peak performance. Here is my interview with Dr. Mitch Abrams. Hi, Mitch. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we are going to be talking about regulating our emotions and specifically around anger, which in itself can be a bit of a hot topic. So I'm glad you're here to share with us, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Petra. I think anger is an emotion that everybody struggles with, primarily because they don't think they have permission to experience it. And I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, people will feel a little bit of sense of relief that they're not as crazy as they think they are, or at least as crazy as all of us are, and feel more empowered to use their anger in a way that'll help them get where they want to go in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you're the perfect person to share these perspectives with. So thank you for joining me today. And for starters, would you like to share a little bit about your story, maybe the parts of your story and your journey that you feel connect to what you do today, and share with our listeners a little bit about what it is that you do today as well?
Sure. I grew up probably the poorest kid in a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. And what was interesting about it was, though my family was absolutely money poor, I was fortunate to be very family rich, meaning that I had amazing, doting parents that whenever I fell down in the world, they would brush me off, tell me I'm great, and send me out to the world. That created a real dilemma for me because I was really angry as a kid because life sucked. It really did. The holidays come, your birthdays come, everyone else is getting presents, and you're eating a chicken again. And so I was angry and didn't even realize it. And I think that what happened was that as I was getting a little bit older, my mother started to realize it. And it all culminated one day. I was probably about 13 years old, and I'm in my bedroom raging with some music, right? What could a 13-year-old boy be raging about? I don't know, some girl that doesn't like you, or you're still poor and everyone else is wearing fashionable clothes and you got 2 pairs of pants that you have to figure out how to work over the course of a week. And so I'm blaring my music, and I didn't realize it, but my mother walked in my room. And she's standing right behind me, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm standing over like one of those folding chairs that you only see in like professional wrestling now. And I didn't realize she was behind me, and she just called my name. And I was startled, and I ripped that chair in half. And I didn't know I was that strong. And my mother looked at me and she was terrified. My mother died a long time ago now. And throughout her life, including when she was facing death, I never saw her afraid except that day. And she looked at me and she said, you better get that shit under control, talking about my anger, or it's going to ruin your life. And it's the first time anybody ever said anything to me about anger management. Okay, so I have to get my anger under control. And I'm looking around my neighborhood and I'm thinking, I'm not any more angry than everyone else, am I? I'm not sure. And I'm putting a lot of my anger into sports, and it's helping me be successful. And then I started to realize there's not a lot of guys from this neighborhood that get out of this neighborhood. You wind up dead or in jail. And all of a sudden, I started to have a path. Like, I want to stop people from destroying their lives with anger. Then, as I'm working my way through undergraduate studies, I was working in a gym in Brooklyn, and I started to realize that I could lift a whole lot more weight when I got myself angry. And I started summoning the anger. And then my sister died. And then I was even more angry. And I can conjure up images of things that would make me upset. And I was benching like 400 pounds at the time. And everyone's like starting to use steroids, and I'm not. And they're like, what's your secret sauce? And I'm like, it's anger. And it was so baffling to me that no one around me would say out loud that anger can make you stronger and better. It was always anger is bad. And so as I headed towards graduate school, I wanted to understand anger management better. And so I went to CW Post, Long Island University, and my mentor, Dr. Eva Feinler, is one of the top child to adolescent anger management people in the world. And I said, I want to take your program and apply it to athletes. And she said, fine, it's never been done. And after I did this, and I started trying to market it, I realized that a lot of coaches did not want my program because they were afraid I was going to turn their athletes into a bunch of wusses. And I said, I'm a middle linebacker by nature. I'm a very aggressive guy. I don't want people to be passive. I want them to be able to harness their anger. And when I made that shift, then people's eyes started to light up because they realized that coaches know how to motivate their players. They don't know how to teach them to adjust the flame, which is the subtitle of my book, right? I'm not fucking angry. Adjust the flame to get what you want and need. And so when you start understanding anger, not so surprisingly, they ask you if you want to come work in prison. And I had no interest in working in prison. And they threw money at me and I said, all right, maybe I'll try it. And I found it was an amazing match between my personality and my training and skill set. And I said, if I don't like it, I'll leave it in 6 months. And so I've been there for 26 years. I'm the chief psychologist for Rutgers University Correctional Healthcare. We provide all the mental health services in the state prisons in New Jersey. And my niche has been working with populations that have difficulty with emotion regulation. And anger being the most pronounced, I think, because people don't talk about it. I came to realize that more people are ashamed of their anger than any other emotion. And if there's one thing that I hope people get away from this conversation is a sense of relief that their struggle with anger is a ubiquitous thing. We all deal with this. It is normal. Anger is a good emotion. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. The key is to learn how to increase your self-awareness and to be able to go up to that red line where the anger can help us perform without going over the cliff. And because once it gets too high, we can't think clearly, we make bad decisions, and we burn ourselves up and everyone around us. So that's how I got here.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. And I feel like you make such a difference in the work that you do because it is, as you said, something that people carry so much shame and guilt around. And mostly, I feel we only hear about anger in negative contexts as well, because it is when people use it as negative coping mechanisms and cross that red line, that we usually then hear about it on the news or in programs because something bad happened. So
precisely
coming to that before that point, I think is a really important part of how we can actually develop a healthy relationship with anger, which is part of all the emotions that we feel as human beings. Where do you see that school systems come into this, for example? I'm curious because you mentioned that you already felt this as a child and then a teenager and young adult. Is there a step that we are maybe fundamentally missing in these emotional regulation pieces where we're not really addressing this with younger children that may already need that piece for regulation and getting to actually work with their anger?
Interesting question. I don't have a simple answer. I find that we've had more problems with parents knowing how to deal with their kids than schools. And that's not to say that the school systems are perfect. They're certainly not. But at least they have trained people who are not emotionally and personally invested in an individual student, so that if a student acts like a knucklehead in a particular moment, the teacher's not worried that their reputation is going to go to crap in the community, where when the parent sees their child acting the fool, that's exactly what they're worried about. And it's not uncommon for children to behave very differently in school than they do at home. And the reason is there's greater structure and accountability in school than there is in homes. I'm going to offer something that's very controversial, but I think that one of the biggest problems that we have is when psychologists came along and said corporal punishment is horrible, get rid of it. There is no doubt that corporal punishment is a slippery slope. If you are trying to discipline your child when you're pissed off, you're going to be stronger. You're probably going to do more damage, and there's a risk of abuse. But corporal punishment has almost been completely eradicated, certainly in the Western world, as a way to do things. And the advertisement that psychologists gave was, all this corporal punishment causes low self-esteem and violent people. Okay, here we are in 2025, almost 2026 momentarily. Actually, it is now 2026. Nice that I'm keeping track of things. And I don't see the world any less violent. I don't see children with better self-esteem, because what corporal punishment helped with, and it's not the only way to do it. You certainly can teach kids respect for authority and accountability without hitting them. But there was a greater expectation, a fear of consequences. And I think children these days, when I say children, I'm talking about people through 30 and men through 40, because we take so long to mature. There's not enough fear of consequences. There's not enough respect for authority. And I think that there are tons of parents that are very well intended that don't know what the hell they're doing with disciplining their kids. And that leads to a huge problem, because now if a parent is not allowed to own the fact that they're angry, you show me a parent that's never angry and I'll show you someone who's lying to you, right? It is a hard job. But if we're saying the parents are not allowed to be angry and learn how to own and harness their emotions, why would we think that they would teach their kids how to do that? So this all trickles down. And I think that we threw the baby out with the bathwater with the corporal punishment. It was well intended, but misguided. And the consequence we have right now is people who think they can do whatever they want. And if you happen to say, no, don't do that, you're a tyrant. No. Society needs structure, and kids need structure.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a household with structure, and I feel that was beneficial. We tested the limits once in a while, but then we knew there was a consequence coming. So that helped find those boundaries within which we could express ourselves and also have those emotions and live them without destruction on the other end. So I do feel that's helpful. Now, you work in the prison system, so you obviously have very much insight on what happens when that red line gets crossed, and then there are consequences, oftentimes criminal consequences, and people come to jail. So Do you feel by working within the prison system that there are pieces that are missing in society where we could actually intervene before these things happen and people end up coming to you? What they would need to know in their lives to actually understand what anger is, how it becomes a piece of some of those consequences that might happen if we don't work with anger in a, I think, more regulated, structured way. Do you feel that there's something that we're fundamentally just haven't implemented, or why that happens, that there's a large population that ends up in prison?
It's an interesting question because it becomes a socio-cultural question. I think there's a lack of appreciation for the fact that most people that have difficulty with their emotions also have developmental limitations that interfere with their ability to predict consequences and appreciate long-term impact of their behavior. This is normal. This is not that as a child that's developmentally disabled. This is average 18-year-old kid does not think about what the 25-year-old kid is going to need. This is certainly impacted by sociological and governmental practices that have disincentivized having two parents in the home. All of the research shows that children in single-parent households, whether it's the mom or the dad that's doing it, are at greater risk for every problem under the sun. And by the way, it's not a shot at single parents because a lot of them do an amazing job with what they have. I think there's three different subpopulations in prison that people don't appreciate. There are some people, and these are the smallest percentage of people, that are really very antisocial, very psychopathic, and they were ruined long before you met them, and they are not fixable. These are the evil people that are sadistic and maybe 5% of the population. Very small percentage. Most of the people are fairly decent people that have done horrible things. And then there's a group of people that didn't have a chance from the go. Didn't have good education, didn't have good resources, parents around them. It's one of the things that, it's an old book at this point, but Nancy Boyd Franklin wrote Black Families in Therapy, I think in the 80s. And it was so powerful to me because she talked about how in the Black community, very often you would have the strength of the extended family and the church to help provide guidance when someone else was not doing it. There's not enough structure. I think that from a psychological point of view, actually, it's as much of a sociological point as it is a psychological point. We're entirely too reactive and not proactive enough. And so for most of the people that are incarcerated, there's a lack of appreciation of what do you have to teach these kids that in a way that they can understand it. Like, for example, let's not just talk about people that are incarcerated. Let's talk about people that get sent to me for domestic violence, right? Perpetrators of domestic violence. Much more often you get men referred to than females, although there's a lot of females that engage in domestic violence as well. But one of the things that they'll often say is, I wish she would have just hit me. It would have hurt less than the things that she said. So we underestimate the impact of how damaging words can be, not minimizing physical damage. But the other thing that I find is that most of the programs that are out there for domestic violence intervention are very feminist leaning. And basically, you're wagging your finger at the man saying, you're bad, don't do this. Instead of saying, hey, listen, relationships are tough, man. I get it. I don't have a problem with you getting angry. I'm sure there are times that your wife or partner probably thought you deserved a smack in the head too. The issue isn't feeling that way. The issue is if you act on it, you're going to ruin your life. I'm not saying that your wife does not matter or your partner does not matter. Let's focus on just you. Where do you want to be? Do you want to come see me all the time? Do you want me to be seeing you in prison? So you need to understand that your behavior can take your freedoms away. And if you want that, then continue down the path and I'll see you there. But we have to normalize and validate the emotion. And then we can teach people how to do things different with the emotion. And I find that people are surprisingly receptive when you don't tell them they're a piece of crap for what they did. We have learned that parents are much more effective when we correct behavior rather than attack the character of the child, right? What you did is unacceptable, not you're a bad kid, you're a piece of crap, go to your room. The latter destroys. Well, it's the same thing with inmates. It's the same thing that people engage in bad behavior. No surprise that people don't want to talk about their problems because they know if they talk about the problems, the first thing they have to do is deal with shame. Instead of going, I get it. You get pissed off. So do I. In fact, Petra, the thing that's most fascinating to me is almost every time, the reason why the title of this book was I'm Not Fucking Angry is when they would come to me, I'd say, hey, what's wrong? And they'd go, I'm not fucking angry. And they're screaming at me, right? But then when I go, yeah, you are, and it's okay, tell me why. And when they start telling me the things that are pissing them off, almost every single one of them go, I'm like, yeah, I'd be angry about that too. And now, because I believe that most people struggle, the two hardest things to deal with are loneliness and feeling misunderstood. And when you say, hey, man, I get it, they're no longer alone and they're understood. And once that happens, the work is actually fairly easy. Most people don't want their behavior to be the opposite of a calling card, right? I want to put my best foot forward so people want to interact with me, not how do I drive people away because I can't wait to spend the holidays alone. It's not how most people think.
Yeah, and often this goes to just a wider, I feel, emotional intelligence that we often aren't taught, especially if our parents might be very reactive as well, or may have never been taught this either. So yeah, absolutely. Do you find that there are differences in how anger is processed and expressed between males and females? Have you noticed that there's a difference, or do we in both sexes just react with anger in the same ways?
I think that I was trained to believe that they're different. And increasingly, I don't think so. And anybody who has ever upset their wife knows that hell hath no fury. Okay. I think that there's a couple of issues. Testosterone is not a requirement for anger. I do believe that women, on the average, are more socially intelligent than men. They're more socially aware. And I have theories of how that comes to be too, if you want to talk about that. But because they're more socially aware, they also become more socially effective. So the man that's primitive and doesn't have the ability to recognize how he's feeling, have a toolbox full of skills on how to adjust the flame, is more likely to be explosive. And women may be more likely to be sarcastic or verbally aggressive. It's funny, we have these phones, right? And the phones, they help us talk about our emotions because we have these emojis. Let me tell you, Petra, I've had more arguments with people over text misunderstanding because of me not knowing exactly what they're saying with the emojis. That, in fact, there was a woman I used to work with very closely, and I would get to a point I'd be just like, pick up the goddamn phone and tell me what you're really thinking, because I wasn't figuring it out. And what I've come to appreciate, and I think as a sports psychologist has really exposed me to the opportunity to appreciate this, is that one of the reasons why sports are so universally loved is because it is a place that you can emote with different rules than what society and law allow. And let me tell you, I've seen some women really lose their shit when they're playing. And I've seen men quiver in fear at those women. So I think that there's been greater social constraint and expectation of women. I think that there's been an androgenization of gender type roles where women can act in ways that were more male typical. And by the way, women acting like men is not an upgrade. But I've come to appreciate that the differences are less than people think about. But I think that women are socialized with greater skills to manage it. And interestingly enough, a buddy of mine, Doug Hirshhorn, who's big in the business psychology world, has argued that women are better than men in a lot of business ventures because they're not so hyper reactive. They're able to see the long plan better than men. So I don't think that there's really a big difference between men and women with regards to the experience of anger, but I think there's different societal expectations and different skill sets that they tend to be taught growing up.
That makes a lot of sense. I do feel that as women, we're often more pushed towards that caregiving role rather than pursue your business or pursue sports. And although there are families that certainly support whatever their children want to do, but very often we still see that separation where women are more guided towards these supportive and caregiving roles. So I could see how that becomes that pattern later.
There's also a lot of families that have a matriarch that is undeniably the boss.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, many different cultural structures and different kind of environments and patterns, which I think are all very interesting and of course figure into how we address how we work with anger, because that might very much depend, of course, what kind of family you grew up in, who you are as a person, your environment, your culture, right? And different pieces that come into that. And if somebody who's listening might recognize themselves in some of the things that you have talked about, and maybe they tore a chair in half or something happened and they went, oh boy, I think I need to talk to someone about this. Where do you suggest that we start with this? We all have these emotions and they inevitably will come out at some point, but where do we start actually understanding what is a good way to cope with our angry feelings? What's a maybe not so constructive way to cope with that? And how do we find that path that actually allows us a healthy interaction with that? Where do we start with that?
Self-compassion. We got to be kind to ourselves. Are there people out there that are looking to hurt other people? Yes. But I think for most people, they're doing the best they can. Most people don't realize where the red line is until they've gone past it. And they have that, oh shit moment. And oh man, I wish I could just reel that back in. One of the things that I've come to appreciate is I really don't enjoy apologizing. It's not fun. It's not a great experience for me. It's a very necessary one at times. And so I work harder to try to avoid doing things that I need to apologize for. I'm also in my 50s, have a little bit of experience, have some perspective. It sounds almost cliche, but you have to start. There's 3 self-tasks that we have to do. The first task is self-awareness. We have to develop this observing ego to be able to look at ourselves honestly. One of the cool things about being trained as a psychologist is you're forced to watch videotapes of you doing therapy and realizing how much of a fool you look like sometimes. And usually supervisors are patting you on the shoulder like, there, Mitch, you'll eventually figure it out, right? It is very humbling, but critical for us to try to really take a look at ourselves as honestly as possible. Then the next step is self-acceptance. We have to say, hey, listen, you're not so bad. You're trying your best. You're falling short sometimes. Sometimes you hit it out the park. But we have to accept that we have strengths and weaknesses. And if we're smart, we learn to minimize the effectiveness of our weaknesses. We develop a social quilt where the people that have strengths can compensate for our weaknesses and our strengths can cover their weaknesses. But there has to be an acceptance of who you are is okay, is enough. Sometimes more than enough. It doesn't mean that you don't want to improve, but it has to start with a little self-care, because who's going to invest in a business you don't believe in? So you got to believe in yourself. You got to accept who you are. And once you do that, then you can start the self-improvement. You can't do any of that self-improvement stuff because otherwise you're going to secretly have resistance to it. You're going to defend it. There are times that people come to me and like, oh, doc, I think I have a problem with anger. And I'm listening to them and I'm like, oh man, this person is so smart. Every skill I'm going to give them, they're going to find a way to not use. And then so my answer to them often is, I'm not sure that you're really ready to do this work, because you are smart enough to justify everything you do, but yet here you are. And usually people come here because someone else told them they should come. I'm only here because my wife said if I don't come here, she's going to divorce me. So then I do the Jedi mind trick on them, right? I say, do you want to get divorced? No. Then I guess you want to be here. How'd that happen? Okay, so the issue is that you might be a very effective person, but you could be even more effective if you could recognize that sometimes you get in your own way. And that's not you are a problem. That is you are a human. We all do this. We are imperfect beings. The question is, do you want to become a better version of yourself? This isn't you're a piece of crap and how do we flush you down the toilet? This is you are successful in a lot of places in your life. You are leaving money on the table. In fact, I work with a lot of really wealthy people that come to me recognizing either A, they're money rich, but socially poor, right? Or I could be even more successful. And the reason that they've been successful is because they're so bright, or they have this niche knowledge that other people don't have, which is fine if you're in the tech world and you never interact with people. But if you want to really be successful in life and find some peace, it comes from being able to be satisfied in your relationships. And anger is an emotion that if you cannot modulate it, it can sabotage relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's support, right? The social connection, social support. I think those are pieces, also community, that really do lend themselves to when we actually embark on this journey to help us continue on that, whatever self-improvement we're looking for, be that anger or other things around that. But when we're in community without destroying that first by anger, that is a big part of how I feel people move through those self-improvement journeys when they have also that support, and also from other people who may have had or are still having those same challenges, and they can relate, as you said, validating what we're feeling and then coming together on that. So yeah, that's really important piece of that.
If you think about it just briefly on the grand stage of politics, liberal thinking is based off of empowerment. That's the idea, right? Sounds wonderful on the face of it. The problem is now the far left is as bananas as the far right. And what a great idea of liberal thinking, open-mindedness, acceptance has turned into vitriol and violence. And if you drink too much water, you will die. Even good things that are not modulated can become toxic. And it's scary to think about what the world the kids are living in and where it's going to go. But fortunately, as a psychologist, I work on one person at a time or one small group at a time with the hope that the things that I'm saying resonate with people, empower them. And look, one of the reasons why I wrote my book was because I realized that most people that are out there are talking about anger are talking about how to get rid of it. And that just adds more shame. This book is about normalizing it, helping people realize you are not alone, but you're also not powerless. It's like when people say, oh, I couldn't control it, I just blacked out. All right, then how come you're not hitting me right now? You can control yourself. In fact, I think that's something that not enough people appreciate, Petra. Most people have anger management skills. They just have places that they break down. They have what we call indirect triggers, their own insecurities. You push that button, 0 to 100. And everything is, I talk about this in the book, that there's this explosion threshold. Once you get way up here, there is nothing that's going to stop you. Everything in anger management is about don't get there. Because once you get above that, the only things that are going to slow you down are medication, a lot of it, physical force, a lot of it, or let it run its course. So the key is don't get up there. And if you think about it this way, I appreciate your work, and you were talking to me earlier about the issue of people walking around with cortisol just teeming through their body all the time. This is one of the reasons why. You wake up in the morning and you're at this baseline stress level. And then you go, oh, crap, my alarm didn't go off. And you go up a little bit. Now, the healthy thing to do would go, things happen. All right, I have some skills. I'm going to relax, get back down to baseline. Nope, we don't do that. We keep going. And then you spill coffee on yourself. Whoop, now you're up here. And then your wife tells you about a meeting that you didn't know about. Whoop, and it keeps going up. Someone cuts you off while you're driving. And this goes up and up and up. And you're carrying around this compressed spring of pressure. And did you ever notice the straw that breaks the camel's back? The thing that you blast off about is usually the most innocuous, simple thing. And everyone goes, really, Petra? That's what drove you nuts? And you're like, are you freaking kidding me? You didn't see all the other shit I dealt with today. Guess what? You are not alone. That's what most of us deal with. And so if we're trying to avoid that straw that breaks the camel's back, that explosion threshold, we have to increase our self-awareness, give ourselves a break and go, of course you're irritable. Increasingly, I've been talking to people about they come home from work and they don't want to take their stress out on their kids and their wives or husbands. And it sounds funny because the person I was talking to happened to drive a BMW. So it sounds folksy and elitist. But I said, take a look at the emblem that is right in the middle of your steering wheel. Use that as a visual cue to remind you, now's time to chill. Whether you put on a little bit of music, do some breathing exercises, muscle relaxation, do something to help take the edge off so that before you walk through that door, you're not the animal that came in with all of the stress. And conversely, on the really bad days when you don't think that you can get that down, warn them. Say, hey, listen, guys, I had a horrible day, very irritable. I do not want to take it out on you. I love you guys. I just give me like a half hour to decompress, and then I'll come back a different person. Same thing with parenting. Most parents have heard about timeouts. I don't think enough parents have heard about reverse timeouts. Reverse timeouts are when you realize I'm too angry to discipline effectively. So long as the children are safe, another adult's there or they're old enough to offend, I'm going to my room. And this is crazy because nowadays everyone's saying, don't scroll, stay away from your phones. No, pick up your phone, set a 10-minute timer, because otherwise you'll be scrolling for 5 hours. 10-minute timer, put on TikTok, Instagram, mindless, stupid stuff, right? Dogs barking like in ways that sound like they're talking, or cats knocking people's wallets into garbage cans. Things that are innocuous and cute and disarm you. 10 minutes. The alarm goes off, put the phone down, and face the world. Because if we don't model for our kids that we lose it and we need to chill, then don't be surprised when they struggle with it. And by the way, added to that, and I don't think anybody's heard this more than my son Logan, when you do it wrong, apologize. I remember a time that he got himself in trouble, but he deserved a 4 and I gave him a 15. And I came to him afterwards. I said, buddy, listen, I got to apologize to you. How I handled that was not right. I was angry. I was annoyed by what you did, but you got a whole lot more volume from me than you deserved. And I'm sorry about that. And I'm going to work harder to not do that. Because what it does is it shows them that I'm human, so they're allowed to be human. It shows them the importance of apologies, but more important, an apology is useless if you don't change your behavior. And then afterwards, I do better, and then I screw it up again. That's if there's a place for this conversation to come towards an end, it's, listen, I'm an anger management expert. There's no doubt about it. I know more about this than many people in the world. If you followed me around, you would not see this tranquil, never getting pissed off guy. That's just not true. I am a lot better at it than I was when I was that adolescent kid that was ripping apart chairs. I don't make the same mistakes repeatedly, usually. I can tolerate my anger higher than more people, and I can appreciate the utility of it, so I can use it better. But I'm not perfect, and I don't demand anybody that I work with be perfect. I hope that we can learn to evaluate ourselves and continue to improve.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel that our listeners probably feel that same way. They're trying, right? We're all trying to do our best. And as you said, I feel that what you said to your son is also we can utilize that in our relationships, right? With other adults. And so important to communicate with our spouses, partners, workmates, whoever. What is happening? What are we doing? But then if something happens like that, we change our behavior, or at least we work on that and we try to change it. And most of the time, I do see that when somebody actually apologizes to me for something, I do see that they make an effort not to do that exact same thing, maybe a different thing, but not that exact same thing again.
Maybe a different thing. This is an important secret to anger management that people don't recognize. Let's say I'm having difficulty with my temper and I'm blowing up 10 times a week, right? And I go to the brilliant Dr. Abrams and he gives me some self-awareness and some tools and all the rest of that stuff. And in a short period of time, I'm now blowing up only 3 times a week instead of 10 times a week. Nobody ever gives you credit for that because they don't see the 7 times that you avoided. It's not that they don't care. It's they don't even realize it happened. Now, it's also possible that those 3 times are just as bad as the 10. More often than not, that's not the case. But it's one of the reasons why if you have someone in your life that's struggling with anger and they're working on it, you need to give them an attaboy and an attagirl. You have to say, hey, listen, I know this is hard, and I know that situation 3 weeks ago, you would have blown up. And I appreciate and value that you're trying to put the work in. Because when we're making this work, and it's really hard, anybody who's ever been in a good rage knows it feels good. It feels really powerful. And you don't realize the potential destruction that's going on in there. And so what I'd say is, yeah, of course, because anger is a powerful emotion. I'd rather be angry than depressed and sad and lonely. But I also need to be mindful of the fact there's only a 1-letter difference between anger and danger. That D stands for discipline, right? And so I like being angry, but I also can be destructive. And now it's not good or bad. Now I'm learning to adjust the flame. As I'm learning to adjust the flame, I'm not getting it right all the time. It's important that I get feedback when not your best work. And as well, you know what? I saw how you struggled with that. You bit your tongue and you didn't have to. You walked away. You changed perspectives. You considered the consequences of your actions. And you did it differently. Thank you for putting that effort in. That matters so much to someone when they're trying to improve. Because when you're working your ass off and you're making progress and everyone's acting like you're just the same way as you always were, or even worse, you're just like your father. And then they have to pull your family into it. But when you're doing the best you can and you're improving, it's important that people that recognize it give you that pat on the back, which is sometimes difficult for people that have dealt with you when you've done violent or really bad stuff while you're angry. But if we really want to make things better, we have to reinforce people when they're doing it better. It's like in sexual violence prevention work. If you really want to decrease victims, you have to provide treatment to the perpetrators. And you have to also tell them they're doing a good job when they're improving. Not to say that the average person that deals with anger is a sex offender. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if we really want to solve the problem, we need to invest in the process of improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. And if our listeners are curious now and they want to know more or they want to connect with you, maybe see if they can work on some of those things that are coming up, how can our listeners connect with you and where can they find your book?
Okay, so I am very easy to find. My website is www.drmitchabrams.com. You can email me through there. I respond to everybody. And I welcome people just asking what they think are stupid questions that are never stupid questions, because I think that there's too much of people just presuming they know how things are. So I welcome people reaching out to me. The book is available through Amazon. I'm Not Fucking Angry. Adjust the flame to get what you want and need. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, international sellers have it. So I'm also on social media, Twitter. Please reach out to me and continue the conversation. You're not alone, and we can all get through this a little bit better.
Thank you for sharing that. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Mitch's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for where you can get his book. And if you feel that this is something that affects you, or you know somebody who's affected and you just want to have more tools, more skills, maybe your children, you're working with them on these kind of things, make sure you reach out. And as you said, find that community, find your tribe that can also support you in that so that we can all make a difference together. Thank you so much, Mitch, for joining me today and sharing your wisdom. I feel this has been such an enlightening conversation and one that was so needed. We've never talked about anger on the podcast before. So thank you for taking that time and joining me today.
It's my pleasure. I think you'll probably find when you reflect on this that nothing that I said was actually rocket science. All of it is intuitive and people know it in their gut. They're just not allowing themselves to. So hopefully now they will.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for tuning in today, and take care of yourselves. Be well. And I will hear you in the next episode. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.